We want to start with the country of Pakistan, where there has been a large amount of things that have been happening over the past several weeks, including huge mass protest ongoing, and when also included some significant brutality by the police there, and also related to former Prime Minister Imran Khan, who has again today been charged with even more alleged crimes by the Pakistani government. So an increase there in tension. So very happy to have back with us here on the show as we continue here, Junaid Ahmad, who's a professor of law, religion, and global politics, and also the director of the Center for the Study of Islam and Decolonization in Islamabad. Junaid, thanks so much for being back with us.
Eugene, always a pleasure to be with you all.
Well, when we first reached out to you, the big news was the huge protests that had come to Islamabad, which is, I think, still very important and very relevant. But I think we're maybe seeing some of the aftermath of that here in the last day or so. I've actually lost count of how many different criminal cases Imran Khan has been charged with, but he has been charged with yet another case here that seems to me, and tell me if you think I'm wrong, somewhat related to the fact that they can't seem to destroy the street movement that's supporting him, and they just keep layering on these charges, almost maybe as if they're trying to fatigue people, like no matter what you do, you can't release him, but people still seem to be very defiant. So maybe give us a sense of what these new charges are, and talk to us a little bit about the political scene currently.
Well, Eugene, where to begin? Although, it must be said that by this stage, no one, perhaps even the enemies of Khan, take these cases seriously. They are constantly manufactured one after the next to basically keep Khan in jail. But of course, Eugene, we are now into roughly almost 3 years since the regime change operation against Khan, Washington backed, in April of 2022. Khan had multiple assassination attempts on him. These cases started to pile up, and the only solution the military regime saw here was finally to imprison him, not just to put him in a normal jail, but like a supermax isolated prison. And so he's been there since August of 2023. And as we have discussed numerous times, the remarkable part of this whole story is the fact that as soon as the regime change against him happened, millions of supporters of Khan, even critical supporters who were sympathetic to his political party, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, Movement for Justice, have come out on the streets in their millions. And the momentum now over 2 years has not declined at all. In fact, it only increases. And so that is something which proves that however brutal and fascistic this regime is, it is even more so very dumb and stupid, because every action that it takes only increases Khan's popularity and the movement's popularity. I mean, before you could speak about 50 to 60% of the population at the time of the regime change being supportive of Khan. Now it's closer to 80, 90%. And these are validated by consistent Gallup polls showing this. And so right now, what has happened obviously followed the very bloody massacre, what we call the Islamabad massacre, and on November 24th. 24th was when they called for a long march. Khan called for a long march, the movement's leaders, long march to Islamabad, because for the past 2.5 years, the capital city, Islamabad, anyone's been prevented from coming there and protesting peacefully. And, again, it must be emphasized that all of the protests over these past 2.5 years have been incredibly peaceful. That has been the hallmark of this, not just now, but of Imran Khan going back to the beginning of the war on terror days. He went on fairly dangerous long marches to those areas, the tribal areas, where the brunt of the war on terror, massacres, displacement, both by the United States and NATO, as well as the Pakistani military, where the brunt of that occurred. And he went there. We had great, people and activists come from abroad, such as Medea Benjamin. So it has always been a peaceful movement. And even in Islamabad now, when they proceeded on November 24th, the military regime gave the impression initially that, okay, they tolerate this as long as they're peaceful and so on. The only confrontation really that these protesters had was with the shipping containers, which were ubiquitous everywhere. So they would climb on these shipping containers, they'd be singing, dancing, or praying. And of course, there's the image that went viral of a man who was praying on the ship, one of the shipping container, and the rangers who were deployed is before like smiling at him, and then they approach him while he's praying and throw him off the shipping container, and he died. So that kind of symbolize the type of ongoing state terror and butchery targeted against movement, and the fact that they remain so livid that this guy, Imran Khan, sitting in jail, can still galvanize these mass protests throughout the country. And again, we must remember what the balance of forces have been. You have, on the one hand, this singular figure, Imran Khan, and the movement of justice. On the other hand, you have the military elites, the generals, the two most dominant family dynastic political parties, these kleptocratic politicians, Washington, basically everything stacked against him, yet he's been able to succeed in fighting back, sitting in jail. So, to answer your question, Eugene, these cases are constantly concocted to keep him in jail, but no one takes them seriously.
Well, I think that's important context. And thinking about Washington's role, which of course is, now has been revealed, inconclusively in removing Khan. I mean, it seems that they still really want him out. I mean, if someone in Caracas gets a hangnail, then 25 people get sanctioned in Venezuela. But there's been, other than, a handful of Congress people and senators, no real attempt by the United States to try to bring to heel any of the Pakistani politicians, which means they must have some level of agreement with what they're doing. I mean, what is the U.S. interest here? Why would they want Khan gone in the first place, and why would they be so, at least indifferent, if not openly supportive, to these extreme efforts to keep him from, being freed from jail and, most likely returning to power?
Well, we should give credit to the State Department, which after this massacre took place, just like it does with Israel, it called upon the Pakistani military to investigate itself in its role in the massacre. So yes, I mean that was what came from the State Department. Although, Eugene, it must be emphasized that of course, while these characters, the military elites and the political elites that the United States installed after the regime change against Khan, they have, been disastrous, right? So what was considered at the beginning as a great asset in completely erasing the politics of Khan and his movement, particularly on the question of Pakistani foreign policy, where Khan really advocated an independent, sovereign foreign policy that would not be enemies with anyone, including Washington. But of course, as the famous cipher or the diplomatic cable revealed, the United States could not tolerate Khan's aggressive neutrality. That was the term they used, and that had to do with, that was, I always say that that's kind of was the last straw that broke the camel's back, because there are a lot of other reasons, whether it's his support for Palestine and Kashmir and all sorts of other positions, and of course his more than 20-year opposition to the war on terror. I think that is the essential background. And the last straw that broke the camel's back was his, in the timing he didn't control, his visit to Moscow and Putin on the day that he launched the special military operation in Ukraine. So, I think that the Washington perceived the removal of Khan, the removal of the Khan virus, as presenting an opportunity to restore their control and domination through their political and military lackeys. But it's been such a catastrophic disaster, right? So at this point, it does seem like, Eugene, that they are seeing their clownish representatives here in Pakistan as more of a liability than an asset at this point. So and that's the context in which more and more members of Congress are speaking up. And of course, Trump had this kind of personal relationship with Khan, right? I mean, it's not like Khan admired anything about Trump, but when they met together, you know how easily Trump can be impressed by these types of figures. And so the Pakistani American community feels that, Trump, because of that personal relationship, will be on the side of Khan. Who knows? I mean, just being personally, friendly with them doesn't necessarily translate into policy shifts. But on the one hand, but the larger context is what I'm saying. Their deep frustration in the ability of this regime that they installed to, produce the results, do the bidding of Washington, right? And the United States, the previous chief of army staff, who always Of course, that's what they despise about Khan. For the first time in the history of Pakistan, right? Khan has Khan has, usurped the mantle of, Pakistani nationalism in a progressive way, not in, in a third worldist way. Whereas in the past, the military would always propagate a story in which it is the guardian of Pakistan. It's collapsed. And that's why, Khan is we see these constant, like really extreme actions against Khan. And one wonders what's the story here? It's the deep like anger, they are completely irate at the fact that Khan is so popular and their traditional base of support in particularly the largest province of Punjab, that has gone. Punjabis who they expected to love uh, the military, or at least respect it, now despise it. And this is all because of Khan. So, they have their own agenda, but I'm not sure if it serves Washington anymore, right? And so, the previous Chief of Army Staff, General Bajwa, who was the guy who kind of on the ground orchestrated the regime change. He went to Washington and said, because of the China relationship of Pakistan, he's like to like please his masters in Washington. He says, I really don't even like Chinese food, right? To kind of send a signal how kind of he's kind of anti-China as well. And the new chief of army staff, has accomplished this great feat of being even more despised than the previous chief of army staff, Bajwa, the current chief of army staff. And by the way, I apologize for any dog barking in the background. This is a time where we need to keep a lot of guard dogs around us in this country. But the latest, the new chief of army staff, General Asim Munir, this guy is directly or indirectly complicit in the targeting and murder of Chinese workers in Pakistan, right? And he's completely destroyed. The Chinese are not dumb either. They are now limiting their investment in this kind of flagship project of the BRI, Belt and Road Initiative in Pakistan, called CPEC, the Chinese-Pakistan Economic Corridor. They have, stopped, investing, have kind of stopped the kind of infrastructure construction, knowing full well the games that Islamabad is playing, and still trying to desperately be the servants of Washington right now.
Well, a lot here and a lot to keep sorting through. And Junaid, we always appreciate your willingness to come on and help us sort through it. And I think there'll be more to say December 13th, another big protest day. But Junaid Ahmad, thank you so much for being with us here on the Freedom Side.
Thanks so much, Eugene.